Action.
Great. Good evening, and thanks for joining me tonight. My name is Jody Hammer, and I am the Career Services Specialist here at NPCA in our Global Reentry Program, and I'm really honored to have with me here behind the scenes my boss, the Director of the Global Reentry Program, Dan Baker, who's waving to everyone right now, I believe. So we are going to be talking tonight, I'm going to be talking about changing careers as a mid-career professional. And we have a small enough group, as Dan was saying earlier, for those of you who just joined, that I really think we can do this with, you can probably even unmute if you want to drop your comment in the chat box, and then, you know, we can certainly call on you to maybe elaborate. That would be great. And I am going to try here putting my camera on. My camera, any of you who've been participating with me on these knows that my camera does not like to stay on. So it probably will go off and just show the no camera option in a little bit, but I'm going to have it on to start with. And I encourage you to do the same if you're comfortable with doing so, but you know, certainly if you're not in a place where you can do that, I understand as well. So let's go ahead and start before we get into the details of, you know, career changes for mid-career professionals. I always put this introduction slide on, and it's simply to show you what global reentry is, since we do have some new faces that I don't recognize, some new names. Global reentry, you know, we have 4 different pillars, as we call it, and the one that I focus mostly on is career services. So providing job search assistance in these ways of doing, you know, webinars, of doing the podcast, the Jobs with Jody podcast that we've begun to do, as well as answering your individual questions and such. So certainly you can always reach out to me as well. But we also have the pillars of the education pillar, which, you know, really connecting RPCVs to, you know, educational opportunities and sometimes special financial incentives or rewards that they have. Some universities have for RPCVs, but there's the well-being pillar that's really kind of getting off the ground now as well, and that more focuses on your emotional health and well-being and support, you know, as you've gone through, whether it's the transition or job search, things like that really are stressful. And then finally, the continued service pillar, where what we're really looking to do long-term as well is to help invoke that you all have that commitment, right, to service, but helping people stay connected and connected in their passion areas to doing work and volunteering and just making a difference now that you're home as well. So with no further ado, I am going to go ahead and dive right in tonight and talk about career changes for mid-career professionals. First, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, you know, what is a mid-career professional? I have people who probably were maybe hesitating, should I participate in this tonight? Is it going to be, you know, targeted to me? Am I a mid-career professional? Do I qualify? Well, I'd like to reassure you, first of all, wherever you are in your career, this will be applicable, much of it, whether it's for right now, if you're looking at doing a career transition and feeling burned out or whatever the situation is, or if you're just thinking ahead and you're an earlier stage career professional and thinking about what's down the road. So I think we're really going to be able to meet everyone's needs here. So I do want to ask you, does anyone have an idea? You can just drop it in the chat box if you want. What is a mid-career professional? Like, how many years of experience do you have to be a quote-unquote mid-career professional? Okay, and let's see if Dan, if we've gotten some here. I'm going to try to get my chat box too here. All right, there we go. What do we have here? Anyone? While we wait for answers, yes, great.
One definition I saw is 10 years, another says 5 years.
Yep.
I was about to type in 10 years myself, 7 to 10.
7 to 10, yeah. Yep. Great, and I have it open now. Great, thank you so much. You know, and there's a lot of discussion on what really qualifies as a mid-career professional, right? It's kind of loosey-goosey. It's not a set, you must have X years of experience and no more than X year to be a mid-career professional, right? But when people talk about the stages of your career, you generally have your early career, right? Which is usually, you know, that first, you know, maybe that first 5 to 7 or 10 years of your professional career. That's kind of your earlier career, right? Now, this is based on the concept of somebody working on average about 40 years, right? Now many people are working beyond that these days, but generally 35 to 40 years is your traditional, what you are in, how long you're in the, traditional job arena as an adult. Okay. So given that, it's a little more, to get to that mid would be, where you get to be maybe at that 15 to 20. So they really oftentimes, you'll hear a lot of people refer to mid-career as oftentimes 10 to 15 years of experience. You definitely have experience, and you're not just new out of the gates, but you're not in that latter career either. And oftentimes that's where this mid-career area is where people begin to feel maybe the desire for a career change. So again, it doesn't really matter, what the exact number is, because this will be applicable for everyone. Okay. Great. So thinking about changing careers as a mid-career professional, right? It probably evokes certain feelings, right? And I'm wondering if people can share, if you are by chance, many of you might be contemplating a career change right now, and that's great. And you'll, I hope, find a lot of relevance in what we're going to discuss. Others of you might be thinking, well, eventually I want to do 5 more years of this and then maybe, consider changing. So what are some of the feelings that are, that the concept of the thought of a major career change or a pivot or a complete 180, what kinds of feelings does that bring up for you in your own situation? And just drop the adjectives or the words in the chat box. That's great. I'm looking at them as well. Great. Giovanna says, curiosity. Been doing the same thing for a long time. Curious if there's more, if I can do more. That's great, Giovanna. And that definitely is one of the reasons people oftentimes look at changing, right? They've been doing the same thing. Not that they're desperately unhappy, but they've been doing it for a long time. Maybe they don't have as much learning that they have anymore because they have it down. And so it's a little less exciting, or a little, maybe even, dare I say, boring. But it's not an awful job. You're not miserable and, counting the days. But yeah, so that can be, that can be one of the reasons why people really do change. What else do we have in the chat box here? Just kind of feel behind in knowing what or how to do things to get into a different field. Great, Hillary, I am glad you are here, because that's exactly what we're going to be talking a lot about, is like thinking about how can you, you may know you want this career change, but how do you do it? And how do you decide what you want to go into? Those kinds of things. So we're going to talk a lot about that. So I'm really glad you're here today, Hillary. Thank you. Anyone else? Any other feelings come up when you think of career change? And I know some of you are in a career search right now because you are unemployed, and that may have been, you may have had a career beforehand, and now, well, you may have had your experience of Peace Corps before, and now you're kind of forced to be looking at maybe something else if you're not looking at, going back or waiting, because everything's still, as I understand it, a little on the, who knows when, right? So it can, some of the other feelings I'll add in, and please add yours if you have other thoughts. Some of the other feelings that do come up oftentimes are feelings of either relief, like, oh my God, I've got to have a change, and everything will be better once I have a new career. Like, I hate what I do. I'm miserable in this. And I totally, my heart goes out to people who are in a situation where they do feel so miserable that they're just desperately looking at, any kind of a career change as, the solution. And it can be the solution, right? And you're going to need to look at, why are you unhappy? Is it really the job, or is it maybe the supervisor or the team, the toxic environment? Maybe you'd be happy in another organization doing the same thing, those kinds of things. So sometimes it's not always a total career change that's needed to make things better in that case. So I just wanted to plug that. But I haven't seen, the one that I haven't seen yet, and I'm looking again here, is fear. When people are interested in a career change, but they're reluctant. They're fearful, and oftentimes that's because they're fearful of what? What are they fearful of? Throw out what they're fearful of in the chat box. It's great. What kinds of things keep people in a career beyond what they would like to be? Fear of what? Fear of change. That's a huge one, right? And it is a big change. When you're changing careers, there's a lot involved. And so it is going to be different than what you've had. And you may know and understand how to do the job, so it's pretty easy, that kind of thing. Fear of failure, Giovanna, thank you for putting that out there as well, right? It's daunting sometimes, especially as you start to look at like, okay, what's required if I want to do this career, and all the things. There might be certain educational courses you have to take, things like that can be daunting, and you can worry, gosh, am I making the right decision? Will I fail? Will I, all of those things. So we're going to talk tonight about ways to hopefully make that decision more, I guess I'd say wisely, or to consider your options before just jumping in, right? Because that I think is definitely advantageous. Sumar says a drop in salary. Yep, you fear a drop in salary. Yes, especially, gosh, yeah, integrating quickly into a new team. You may have to lead. Yeah, that can be scary too, right? You don't really know the dynamics of the team that you'd be going into. But back to your drop in salary, that's one that I think keeps a lot of people from changing their careers. And it's kind of like, I oftentimes call it the golden handcuffs, right? And people, you've heard that, of course, too, right? Where people may go, for example, maybe they go to law school, and they thought they wanted to be a lawyer, and they got the corporate law job. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But they're, working in that field or whatever, they're totally burned out. They're really, ready for a change. They want to change, but they've got huge student loans from their law school. They are, looking at almost definitely a probably major, oftentimes major, I should say, salary reduction. So that can be really scary, right? Especially when you have things like, families or, children, you're thinking about their education and all of those kinds of things. So it really can be, I think, pretty daunting, the salary one. That's a really good one to bring up. And speaking of the salary, many people, decide they really want to work in the nonprofit arena, or that's where they find their sense of reward, right? Myself included, other than, Peace Corps, the agency, the government agency, when I did similar work to what I was doing before this job. So many times people, when they're thinking about, nonprofits, they think, oh gosh, but nonprofits don't pay anything. That's not always true. I mean, they tend to pay less than corporate in some of the really lucrative careers, of course. But it really depends. Sometimes there's some larger ones, or some or there are some that maybe have better salaries. But the other thing is thinking about ways you can get around, like, yes, it may be a reduction in salary, but you need to also factor in, what's your work-life balance? Oh, you're not working 80 hours a week. Oh, really? You are not, having to eat takeout food every meal because you have no time to get home and spend time, work-life balance with your family. So a lot of those things are pretty priceless as well. So those factor in as you're thinking about whether or not this does make sense. And a lot of times you can work with your other, if you do have a significant other, a partner, a spouse, and look at, together how you might be able to structure this, so that that you may be able to do that. So just some things. Don't poo-poo the NGO world altogether either, because it's not always what everyone, it's so low and that kind of thing. So great. Let's see. Giovanna says, Sophie, why the feelings evoked, not as successful as previous job. So maybe you've proven yourself in your career and you're considered an expert. You are considered, you're really respected. So you've worked hard for that, right? And that takes a long time. So when you think about, okay, now I leave this career and I go to a totally different career, does that mean I'm starting over and completely having to build up from ground zero, right? So yeah, that you worry about whether or not you're going to be able to do as well. Like, oh, I think I want to do this, but will I really like it? Will I be as successful or as good at it? And that can be daunting as well, or evoke some fear, right? And we're going to talk about ways to like getting more information about the career, doing some different kinds of assessments that can help you maybe know better if that would be a better fit for you, things like that can hopefully mitigate that to some degree, at least. So great. So wonderful. We have some good responses there. Let's go ahead and move forward. So who can help you, if you're thinking about a career change, and, you may not know what the career change is, right? And we're going to talk about that aspect tonight a lot, right? How do you decide that, right? It's not so easy as just ABC and picking something, right? It's a big decision that affects you, potentially your, loved ones and all of that. So, a lot of different people can help you. your current network, I cannot overemphasize the importance of your current network, your family, your friends. If you are thinking of a new career, now, the one caveat that I want to put out there is if you are trying to do a job search and very discreetly, which I'm going to do another webinar on doing a job search discreetly and how you can do that, because for some people, you have to really do that. You're in a career where you really can't let it be known that you're looking to leave, right? But for others of you, it's, you have a little more, ability to do that. And you can certainly ask for whoever you talk with, in confidence, but you may not be putting on your Facebook, hey, looking to connect with people, anyone who works in the XYZ field or in, in this job sector. Thanks for connecting me. And, like some big, where you might do that if you're not, worried about, the word getting out, that kind of thing. So you can really tap into your current family and friends and talk to them about their own experience if they know somebody who works in that field, to get more information, right? And of course, research, right? I mean, research is, I didn't even put research on here, but you can learn so much about jobs and things by just doing your research online, right? There's a lot of information. Department of Labor actually puts out, and I think I have a slide later on about Career One Stop, which is, that's in, most cities and stuff, most bigger cities anyway. And they have, it's the same kind of resources that they'll share with people who are doing a job search, who are unemployed, but they'll have like information on a lot of different sectors and, what kinds of, jobs. They'll oftentimes have access to the assessments free. Some of them are free and some of them have a fee, but oftentimes you can get the fee ones free through Career One Stop. Department of Labor also has some other sources that I believe are on that same slide that I have a little bit later. But the government has a lot of resources to help you because they understand that career transition is a normal part of life these days, right? I mean, back in the day, my grandparents, you can look at certainly great-grandparents did the same job their entire life. Their whole life, right? 40 years, 35 years, whatever it was, they did the very same thing, right? And most of us would look at that and go, ugh, I would hate that. Like, oh my gosh, I want variety. I want to have. And today, the truth of the matter is people change jobs much more frequently. So by the time you get to retirement, you're probably going to have 5+ different distinct careers, not just jobs and job titles with different employers, but different careers, which is kind of hard to get your head around. And that actually might be even, I figure might even be larger now. This is from several years ago, but it definitely, things have changed, right? So you need obviously to be thinking about, and chances are you are going to be changing careers several times, right? And there are different reasons why you're changing careers, right? Like we were saying, with, why, maybe you're frustrated, right? But what are some of the other reasons why you might be thrust into, maybe not even, I just want to change, I want more, whatever, I want to follow my passion, like all of those are great, right? But what are some of the external factors that can impact? Anyone in the chat box that can kind of throw you into a necessary, career change? Relocation, yes, Giovanna. Maybe you are required to relocate somewhere. Maybe you have a family and your partner received some job that's a really good opportunity for the family, and you're moving across the country. Then you have to be doing, it may not be a career change. It may be the same kind of career if you're liking it and you're happy in it, but it could actually be a good opportunity oftentimes to explore if you are, looking for change anyway. So great. Great. Elimination of the old role. That was one of the ones I was definitely looking for. Oftentimes in our, environment, certain jobs are becoming more obsolete, right? I mean, you look at oftentimes even, look at the like secretary types of, there's like the admin assistant, whatever, but the secretary, the greeter at the front door type of, person that just let people in. Those jobs are many times, getting, reduced. There's not nearly as many, but lots of different kinds of jobs, right? Dan, good point. COVID-19 economy, excuse me. Absolutely. That is a huge one, right? It's the reality of our COVID environment is that there are different kinds of jobs that are available. Some are no longer really happening. And so you need to pay the bills. You need to look at something else, right? So that's a really good one. Thank you. And laid off as well. Yep. Those are all good ones. So in those situations, in addition to your family and friends, your network, you have professionals in the field. So doing that, and you can find, and I talk about this a lot, many of you who've tuned into other ones have heard me talk about, doing a people search on LinkedIn. You have your LinkedIn profile, you go up to the little search bar, and then you choose like all filters, right? You want to see all the filters, but you really only care about and are only going to fill in the past employer and your current employer or sector or whatever. So past employer, you put in Peace Corps, because what you're trying to do here is connect with the 220 plus thousand, RPCVs that are in the world, right? Many of them are going to have Peace Corps on their LinkedIn profile. So you're going to be able to connect with a lot of them. And trust me when I say you are family. Even if they don't know you, if somebody reaches out to you and they say, hey, I'm a fellow RPCV, I was just evacuated from wherever. Any RPCV with half a heart is going to be, it's going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you were evacuated. Sure, I'd be happy to talk to you, because, maybe and you phrase it such as, I just am looking to connect with, additional, with more RPCVs. And then once they accept your LinkedIn request, then you can go back for that career chat request. And you can say, something like, thank you for connecting with me. It's always great to connect with fellow RPCVs. I'm wondering if you might have, 15 to 20 minutes of your time at your convenience to chat a little bit about your own career and any tips or advice you might have. That's very low pressure. You're not saying, I need a job desperately. I need you to find me a job. Can you find me a job, please? Here's my resume. Will you send it on to everyone you know? No, you're not saying that, of course. So that's an easy way. And trust me, RPCVs want to help other RPCVs. And if you don't get a connection request, please know that it more than often is not that they don't want to connect with you, even when you say you're an RPCV. It's more that they just don't check their LinkedIn that frequently, or their connection requests or whatever. So just be patient. Okay. So great. Career professionals as well. So by that, I mean, there's a lot of different ones, right? There are career coaches. The career coaching field is actually it has been a growing field. And these are, people who kind of, they're your support system, and they hold you accountable. So they talk with you about maybe what's stopping you from moving forward, and they work through, and with you in, in your, whether it's your job search or whatever. You have life coaches. So you think of life coaches too. Some of those life coaches really specialize in the career field. Others focus on other topics. Some focus on financial aspects and getting your finances in order or whatever. And then you have career counselors as well. Very similar, but a little different. And they work with, oftentimes career counselors are found in universities or places like that, where they're working in a career center. So they're helping, the students with, what do you want to do? What are you thinking, job search wise, helping you in those, kind of aspects. And so certainly, career coaches it's typically a fee. That there's like a monthly fee or whatever. And it really varies. Vastly. Many times they'll give you a complimentary, like, intro session to kind of see whether you might be a good fit or not. And just, you can kind of get a feel of whether you're interested. But oftentimes you can also look at, like, career counselors, like I said, your alma mater. Go back to your alma mater. Even if you graduated a while ago, some of your universities and such, right, will, they'll actually allow you to access some of the, materials or the people, the career, counselors that are on staff, to ask questions about maybe your own, redefining or change, your career change. It behooves them to do so, because they want to have successful, right, alumni who then reflect positively on their university and all of that. So some do, some don't, but just to put that out there. Who else can be helpful? I guess I'm looking to you all for insight now. Who else in your experience have you found is helpful with regard to thinking about the career, change aspect? Anyone that I've missed or that falls under the other category? Let's see here if there's anything coming in. And maybe we've got them all. What do you think, Dan? All right. But just suffice it to say, there are a lot of people who can help you, and tap into those networks, because people really do want to help generally. And oftentimes with COVID-19 now, maybe families with school-age children or young kids apart, aside. Many people who maybe don't have a family and such, they might have more time on their hands now than normally. For those of us who have families, we're busy with trying to oversee, the distance learning and all that fun stuff, which is, crazy. But sometimes a lot of people might have more time now than they normally have. They're all teleworking and they're getting their work done and they have more time. So they might even be able to spend a little extra time with you. So there's lots of people who want to help you. Okay. So tips on finding the right path for you. I want to talk briefly about that. And then I'm going to be sending you in the follow-up some additional information for you, some good articles to help you and some good resources on, some of the assessments, if you're interested in assessments, things like that, that you can tap into for additional information and insight. So one of the things that you can do when you are just thinking about what is the right path for me, like I know I want to change, I'm either feeling really unfulfilled or burned out or just bored or any of those things that we were talking about. I know I want something different. I just don't know what it is. So what you can do first is look back on your career so far. And I mean by career, I mean include your high school jobs, your jobs where you were maybe waiting tables or you were whatever, because you can gain a lot of insight from those on what you like, what you want, and what you don't want, right? So I waited tables through grad school, when I was, in graduate school at a fancy Italian restaurant. And while I don't have any desire to do that job or be a manager or whatever, what I learned from that job, because I did well in the job and I was selected for a trainer to train the incoming people on proper, procedures and protocols. So it was training. And I loved that. I always looked forward to, oh, great, it's a day I get to train people, and welcome them. And so for me, what I really learned from that was connection and training are huge things that are my passion areas. And look at where I'm at right now, doing my passion area. And that is my passion area. Connecting here in my position now, connecting with my passion area and population of RPCVs. You are the most amazing group that's out there. I've done a lot of different work with a lot of different people, but RPCVs, returned Peace Corps volunteers, are exceptional because you all go out, you do Peace Corps, right? You're doing this, great work, and you're working hard at it, and you're being, you're smart. You can take the ball and run with it. You learn, you fail, and you learn from that, and you keep on going. You're resilient, all of those things. And so for me, this is the ideal fit for me, for my career, right? I love working with RPCVs, and I love the career arena, job search arena. So whether it's, resumes or cover letters or interviewing, doing a mock interview, I love that kind of thing. So finding, but I found a lot of that even when I looked back, and I found from my, restaurant experience, right? Customer service and all of those kinds of things. So you can really like just kind of, write out what were the things you liked the most about your past jobs, right? You can also make a list of what you didn't like, certainly, but really focus on what was the most rewarding times. What were they? What did they involve, right? Great. So seeking insight from people who know you is the second one. And that kind of is, when I was talking about, talking to your network, right? But a lot of times other people, your close friends and family, they know you and they can see and sense oftentimes more than what you think they do. And so if you finally come to the point, you've been unhappy in your career, whatever, and you finally come to the point where you're like, enough, I think I'm going to change, jobs. And they're like, well, finally you seem, that's great. And they can give you insight oftentimes on, what skills you have, because sometimes when we're in a rough patch and a rough space where we feel, it's not a good fit where you are. Maybe it's that you're not feeling like you're doing well. Maybe it's not the right fit. So you're not doing well in your current job and you're like, this is not working. I don't want this. I want to do well. Nobody wants to continually, underproduce or fail, right? And so it's learning from that and stepping away. And so sometimes your close friends and family can give you more insight into where they see you shine, when you light up, right? What brings you joy? That's the big question. that you ask, look at what brings me joy, and trying to incorporate those kinds of things into your career. So journaling, there's a journaling activity where you can write a letter to yourself, and there's a couple ways to do this, right? I've talked in the past about doing writing your own obituary. It sounds really, morbid, but like your career, like what you would want to be remembered for. But I really like the spin on it that a dear friend and coaching colleague of mine, Denise Riebman, puts on it. And she talks about more, write a letter to yourself. And this is your 20 years down the road self that's writing a letter, right? That's writing a letter right now about what they're most thankful for, what they've, what their accomplishments, their whatever, like what they're most proud of. It's not so much, I'm so great, I did this, but it's more, what are you, so you're writing a letter to yourself from 20 years in the future, and you're saying, by that point, you want to have accomplished what, or what will make your life feel rewarding. So by doing that and putting your mindset into that future, it can give you equally as much insight onto, okay, so this is what you want to you want to feel you made a difference in the community, or whatever. And those kinds of things can be helpful in guiding you to the right type of career, the right career path. And remember, when you're talking about like changing careers, right? Like it can guide you to the right career. It doesn't have to be the career forever. Like I said, you're probably going to change, probably at least 5 times, right? Or more in your life, careers. And it's okay, but it's that next step that's right for you. And then you can reassign, and establish what works, and reassess and go from there. So, and then lastly, I do encourage, one of the ways you can certainly do, there's a lot of career assessments that are out there. There's a ton of free ones. And one of the articles that I'm going to be sharing with you has several different options for career assessments that are listed. But there's everything from the Myers-Briggs, type indicator, to the Strong Campbell interest inventory. There's Strengths Finders is a really popular one in recent years. There's and those are some that have fees for them, right, to have them done. Some are less expensive than others, but most of those have a quote unquote free equivalency, more or less. It might not be the exact that test, but it's similar, and it can give you a lot of insight. So for those of you who don't have a lot of discretionary income, you might consider doing some of those, the freebie ones as well, that can be really good as well. The Keirsey temperament one, I believe the online one is one of the free ones that can be great. But these are assessments that, there are some, there's a values one. There are some that get more to what are your values and how do those fit with different careers. There are, other ones that, will be more of kind of your personality or your working style, right? Your Myers-Briggs, you get that, 4-letter, ENFP is what I am. I'm a classic ENFP, right? The extrovert, intuitive, I'm trying to get it, feeling and perceiving. So if you look that up, Myers-Briggs, what does that mean? What kinds of jobs? They'll have a lot of information on. There is a lot of information out there on what kinds of jobs do specific types, in the Myers-Briggs or Strengths Finders or whatever, really excel in and tend to like and tend to find, real fulfillment in. So that can be really helpful for you as well. So I always like to, point people to do that in the beginning as well. So for some of you, you're feeling there's that whole dead end career change. You may be getting to the point where it's okay, I've put this off long enough. I've been fearful. I've been, concerned about other things, and sometimes you have to delay a career change, right? And other times you have to do it at that point. It's it really needs to be done. Either my personal, happiness is so much at stake, or, feeling, so frustrated, things like that. But career change, I just want to, again, remind folks that this is a choice. And any choice has, when you think about the pros and the cons and all that kind of thing, it's not necessarily as easy as just listing pros and the cons, and whatever you have more of is what you should do, right? Because one con could be equal to 5 of the pros, right? I mean, there's so you have to kind of do that weighted balance kind of thing too when you're looking at what your lists are. But it can help to do that, that simple one. But just career change, it's something to embrace and go from there. So when we talk about steps to changing careers, right? One of the things that it's that changing your mindset, like looking at a career change not as like, oh, I've got to do this, like a have to, but rather excited, like being excited and like, wow, this is an opportunity to really realign my my work with my passion. So trying to have that positive outlook, because trust me, when you are doing eventually the job search to go along with that career change, people can smell negativity like you can't believe. So you don't want to be that person that's going to be the that negative. You want to come across in your interviews, in your networking, in all of that as a positive, right? Even when your reason for having to change is a negative. Like let's say your career changed, maybe you weren't doing well in it, or you got fired from it, or whatever, like it was eliminated, the position was eliminated, or that kind of job type is being eliminated, where you certainly didn't choose that necessarily, but that just happened, right? Try to embrace the change, and it's hard, but embracing the opportunity. This is an opportunity for me to look at what I really want to do, and something else will, surely, come to the surface when I spend time reflecting, and that just being as positive as you can. Okay, and we understand you're going to have days where it might be harder to be positive than others, but figuring out what you want to do, which we've already talked about, right, to some degree, looking at the career assessments, talking to other people, doing some journaling on your own. There's so many other ways you can do that, and I encourage you to do some online research. I mean, you can find so much information online, right? Just Googling, how to determine my next career, how to choose a, second career, those kinds of things, okay? So find out what skills you need for those jobs, right? So you find a lot of those from when you talk to people in the field, and you ask them things like, what is the biggest skill set you feel you needed to get into this job? And what are the skills you've learned in doing the job? So you can kind of get that idea of like, oh, okay, so what, if I have those skills, and then if I can, really put those on my resume and get those, and speak to those kinds of skills that I might have, that can really help me be a much stronger candidate for that position, okay? But sometimes the skills that you need to learn might be more than just your training when you first start, right? It might be things like, oh, you really need to get a degree in, or a certificate in whatever, to be competitive in that field. And if that's the case, or in the case of, I actually have a dear family friend where the husband is, they're about our age, and the husband is literally going back to school for an IT, after doing, a completely different job in production, of like news production and that kind of thing. So huge change. And it's a huge decision, and he's going back to school and literally getting his degree in that, and during that time he's not going to be bringing in the income, like that kind of thing. So sometimes it's a drastic amount of investment that you may need to make, and you need to decide whether or not that's something you want to do, but it can be worth it if it's going to get you a career that you're going to be happier in, or you're going to be able to really put yourself into, or maybe it has better family life balance, all those things that might be important for you. So another thing that you can do is really, you can talk about, making a budget. Like, you don't have to jump tomorrow, right? You can think about this in advance. And the great thing is, if it does require you to maybe do some additional training, you could start putting aside a budget, maybe to live on, if you don't have a second income coming in that might be able to cover it, that it can help you, fund, your new career and what you're looking to do, or get you to the next job. So budgeting is key, right? And, the great thing is RPCVs are used to living on a shoestring budget. So oftentimes we're pretty good at maybe doing that, and sometimes not. And by the way, our podcast on this Wednesday, is going to focus on, we're going to talk with the money gal, and we're going to talk about, student loan and debt and budgeting and all of those things that, make a lot of us cringe, but are so important. So we're going to talk about that, and that podcast will be available on in the Jobs with Jody podcast that you can get on Spotify. So great. We are oftentimes, you need to learn the new skills that there are. Learn those skills. If there are some that are pointed out that you really don't have yet, you don't want to lie when you're, going for a new job. So maybe try to get some experience, in learning some of those new skills, right? Sometimes you can do that by even doing some volunteer work in, there's a great resource, I think, volunteermatch.org. Dan, can you drop that in the chat box? Would you mind? It might be volunteermatch.com, come to think of it. If you can put that in there, Dan, that'd be great. It's a great resource because basically it connects you. You can put in your key, whatever your passion areas are, right? So maybe your passion area is HIV/AIDS, education. And so yeah, volunteermatch.org, it is org. And you then, you put your passion area in, and then your region, where you live, right? And it will spit out a list of organizations that are looking for volunteers in those areas. Now, I know you're looking for a career change, not a volunteer opportunity, but volunteering can be a great way to build your skill set to get you to that career that you want, that you're maybe not quite qualified for yet. So if you do volunteer, match.org, and you find, an opportunity, you could then put that on your resume as well and be more competitive. So great. Make meaningful connections in the industry. And a lot of this comes back to, doing those kinds of career, connections. How else might you connect in the industry that you want to go into? Can anyone put something in the chat box, or actually unmute yourself and just say it? That's fine too. We have a small enough group. How could you connect with the industry that you're looking to change into? What are some of the ways that you might be able to make meaningful connections? Let's see here.
Well, Jody, I'd be happy to share that a big reason that I'm in my current job here at National Peace Corps Association was that I joined the board of directors at one point and offered to volunteer for a while, and then that turned into a position on the board, and that can be advisory board volunteer work or board of directors, but it's a great way, at least in the nonprofit world, to get a foot in the door.
Definitely. No, that is awesome. That's a great idea. Thanks, Dan, for breaking the ice. If anyone else is as brave as Dan and you want to maybe share something or type it in the chat box is fine too. There's a lot of different ways to make meaningful connections, in the industry that you're looking to get into. Hillary, thanks for sharing in the chat box. She says she's asked friends to connect me to people they know. Exactly. And then after talking to those people, ask them to connect me with people they know. Right. Just to meet for coffee or something to talk about their careers. Absolutely. And that's what I call that career chat, right? And tapping into your network to expand your web of alliances, right? Your web of alliance, or your I think of the network as your network as a web, a great big spider web that just gets bigger and bigger, right? And it connects you to many different people. And that's so true. And one thing, Hillary, just to remind you to, and you probably already do this, but when you have that career chat with them, or informational interview, as some people call it, don't have that be your last connection and just take the information that you got from them and go forward. Obviously, you're going to do a thank you note. We know that. But try to stay in touch with them, engage them, keep them posted of your progress. I mean, and it might not be every week, but to let them know, hey, I just wanted to touch base and thank you so much again for your interviewing tips. I just got an interview offer at the whatever company and I'm so excited. And who knows, they might know somebody, they might, at least they feel connected, or at least let them know once you land a job, right? Wanted to just, again, take an opportunity to thank you for the, important role you played in spending some time with me, chatting about whatever this field. I'm excited to inform you I've accepted, blah, 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 whatever position. Like that's how you grow a stronger network and you get to know people. It's not just questions, Q&A, and then hang up or whatever, end your Zoom or you're in person and you're done. So, and you can also give them information. You might learn that they're passionate about monitoring and evaluation, and you go home, and you do the whatever, and in a month or a couple of weeks, you come across this great article on M&E, a new approach. You could shoot that to them and just say, hey, just was thinking about you in our great, chat. Thanks again for chatting with me about your own experience. I recall you indicating how passionate you were about R&I. I saw this, not sure if you've seen it yet, da, 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 da. Like, they're going to appreciate that. And that's a give and take. So that way you don't feel so like take, like I'm, like everyone's giving me help. I'm not able to help them. You can in many, many different ways, personal and professional topics. So great. Let's see. And then when the interview process, well, yeah. So in the interview process, you need to, when you're interviewing for a career change, you need to be prepared to explain why you're changing, right? So you want to do that in a positive way, right? And how oftentimes in the tell me about yourself, that first question, you can do some of that, right? But how you want to spin it is in a positive way where, like whatever, you have, extensive experience in the whatever experience. And at this point, you're learning, you're really, you also have XYZ, whatever transferable kinds of skills, right? And you're looking to really take the experience that you've gained and the skills in XYZ and really move in the direction of whatever it is, right? And join an organization, with a mission I'm passionate about and really whatever, and do it like that in your first, here's what, like, tell us about yourself. Because, and you don't want to, when you're in an interview, please don't, as a mid-career professional, please don't do the, make that, well, the youngins who are just coming in, you're just emphasizing that you're not that, and you're not necessarily wanting to do that. What you want them to see you as is a seasoned professional, which is actually a good thing, right? When I hear the word seasoned professional, to me, it comes across as this is somebody who is experienced, who has experience, expertise, that type of thing, right? But it's not somebody who's retired, right? Necessarily. So you don't want to like put yourself apart from the young generation, right? Millennial or the younger than that or whatever. Instead, you want to talk about how you you want to address how you've worked on teams, diverse teams, with, many different of the generational and am able to cross those, whatever. Gaps or really, help with the communication, things like that. You want to really show how you would be an asset in that regard, okay, and what you would bring. And yeah, I mean, and it's, you don't bring up salary until they bring it up, and even then, I would probably try not to be the first to put out a figure. You really want them to kind of come out with that figure if they can first. And then, you can ask what, flexibility they might have given, but sometimes they're afraid of bringing on somebody who's a seasoned professional because of the salary. And they're like, we can only pay this much. And so if you know very well that the career that you're going into is not going to be paying, you're not expecting it to pay what you were, you need to make sure that they do understand that, so that they don't think that you're going to, well, they're not going to take it anyway because they're earning this amount or a lot more surely from whatever. So you can do that. You may or may not directly say, like, I mean, you want to get, as competitive of a salary as you can, right? So you don't want to say, I don't care about money. It doesn't matter. You can pay me whatever, like, obviously. But you can make it part of and why I'm interested in this opportunity. I've had a very rewarding career in XYZ and have, accumulated And I'm really now in a point where I'm able to focus on my passion area, and really more like if they ask you, if they do ask about salary or whatever, that I'm able to consider, in that if they've said, we can't pay the amount that, you've probably, earned, you can come back and maybe, say something like that, where, I'm at a point where I'm not necessarily, it's not the bottom dollar, that's the end all be all only thing that I can consider, as I've made my career and, whatever, saved, that kind of thing. So, because you might be going into a career where you don't expect to get as much, and you're doing it because of the sense of reward. You're doing it because you have saved earlier maybe, or you need that passion, and you need that fulfillment, and that sense of, whatever is to you, you've made the decision that is worth more than the big dollar signs that maybe left you feeling empty and, whatever. So that's your decision. Okay. So great. And we are getting close here, but resumes really quickly. I do want to talk briefly about resume writing. This is almost at the end here, and then just Q&A. So just put your questions. I just encourage you to put any questions that you have about this topic that I haven't covered yet into the chat box, and we'll get to as many as we can, and we'll unmute, you can unmute and share your questions as well. So in terms of resume writing for career change, you want to emphasize your transferable skills. Like I said, your experience. You want to talk about your experience and what you've gained, and those transferable skills that are important in any job practically, but especially those that when you've done your research and what are the top skills that are needed in this, you come up with those lists, and you better be sure to, and you look at the job description, you better be sure to have those skills. So you want to tailor it to each job that you're going for, right? And really include those specific ones that are very important. Always save a copy of whatever you submit, because sometimes the job description and whatever you had, the job description can disappear once it closes, all of those kinds of things. But also consider what I talk about is the, combination style resume. You have your reverse chronological, which is one. And then you have your functional, which is, kind of a completely, different one that doesn't have it just has skill categories in the, in the beginning, like after your, you have your name and stuff, and you have your, key qualifications maybe or whatever, but then you just have basically your main categories. So it might be project management, budgeting, whatever they are, whatever the ones that you're looking to do, like that are relevant to the job that you're going for. And then you pull your experiences from those little, from whatever jobs, your first entry under that, your first bullet under your whatever skill could be from 10 years ago. It doesn't have to be from the most recent job, right? So you build, that's what the functional, right? And then at the very end, you do have this, like, just the work history where you have, job title, dates, organization, location, no details, because the details are all underneath it. That's the functional. So there's kind of this combination style resume that they talk about, that's talked about as being good for career change oftentimes, because here's what happens. When you do a traditional reverse chronological resume and you're trying to make a huge pivot, career change, your most recent experience, is your experience really going to sell you? No, it's drastically different than what you were doing, right? So some people will talk about doing the functional resume, and that can work, right? Especially private sector, not so much in government. But the combination one they talk about, where in your experience, and I like to have the heading professional experience. I think it just sounds more professional. You can have those kind of skills, transferable skills, those hard skills, the main skills that they're looking for in that job. You can have those almost set up like categories within your jobs, if that makes sense. You can do that somewhat in federal resumes too. There's a whole system of doing that, and you can go to USA Jobs for more assistance, or reach out to me and I'll share some information with you. But this combination style resume is really, it focuses more on your skills than I've been doing this for X number of years and it's a totally different job. And especially if I find it helps a lot in teaching, for example. Say you've been teaching for years, and there's nothing wrong with teaching. It's a great, it's great in many, many ways, and a difficult profession, especially now. But you're looking to get out of teaching, but all of your jobs are like teacher, 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 and you were ESL teacher and Peace Corps, so it's all teacher. You kind of have this typecast of she's a teacher. So sometimes, doing, more of the functional one, or functional, or this combination, and you're focusing on, what are some of the skills that teachers have? What do they do in planning? What do they, there's so many things, right? I mean, you could really focus on, classroom management, right? So your management, your planning, your curriculum design, evaluation, all of those kinds of things are very transferable, right? But when I just hear teacher, I assume teaches, grades papers, whatever, right? So keep that in mind as you're thinking about resume writing. And I would encourage you to check a little more into combination style resumes and functional resumes as an option for a drastic career change. That could be helpful for you. Okay, so we are now with the interviews. We actually covered that more or less. I mean, we're talking about now, instead of being this slide was really for more the in-person. That will be back to someday. It will go back to that, although some people say that they will probably do a lot more virtual interviews and such. But preparing for them, and as that mid-career professional, really connecting with them, it being enthusiastic and young, in your kind of persona, how you're presenting yourself as well, is really important. So okay, and we are now at the end, and I realize that it's already 9 o'clock. Boy, time really flies with this. But are there any questions that people have that I'm looking here in the oh wow, Joanna, so it's very similar to, okay, my case example could have been you, huh? So a sample of setting up a combination resume. You're a teacher and feel pigeonholed like you're talking about. Reach out to me, Giovanna. I'm happy to talk with you. And maybe Dan can just throw my, look, you can either email jody@rpcv.org or careers@rpcv.org. Should work. That's a shortened one. So I'm starting to give that one instead of the Peace Corps Connect.org.
I threw that into the chat, as well as a form where we would love to hear your ideas for ways that we can dig deeper into the mid-career discussion and help you out. We're also very happy to help you out individually, answer any questions you have offline. Jody is by far the authority here, but either she or I will be happy to respond to you if you.
Absolutely. Were there any other questions that were coming out, Dan, or are we good? Or anyone who wants to unmute, maybe with a final question, if you have one, and if not, while you're maybe putting yours in, just to remind you to download the chat box by going to the bottom of the chat, and you'll just hit the 3 dots and just clicking on that, and it'll literally give you an option to download the chat. So that way you'll have the resources that we shared. Okay, there is one new message. Let's see if it is. Oh, it's a thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Hillary, for coming. We appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. Any other questions that anyone wants to ask by unmuting?
No, I'm just reflecting, Jody. I think that the point that Giovanna brought up about getting pigeonholed in a career is a topic in and of itself. So we can chat about just making that a focus, perhaps. That's a biggie. And Sumar, my good old friend from Costa Rica is how can we grow in managerial skills? That's a great question.
That is a really good question.
It's that tripwire, you've got to get that first supervisory experience somehow, or first major responsibility, and what are good ways to get that before you jump?
Yeah, and I find that's oftentimes very much the case in like federal, where it keeps you from moving up, where they want, once you get to the 11 or whatever level, right, they want some managerial, right, before you get to that, 13 or, so it's sometimes hard to get that. But remember that even for like federal, applications, but for non-fed too, your managerial experience can be from volunteer work, right? So we were talking about, volunteermatch.org, or just your own self, you keeping balanced and feeling like you do, things for your work, and then you have something you do for the community, and you have time for your family, and you kind of balance that, right? Well, in your volunteer work, you can oftentimes land into positions where you're managing programs and the other volunteers maybe in the program, and that's management. That is managing, right? So don't define it I mean, sometimes people get, I think, pigeonholed thinking, well, I haven't had the job title of being a manager. But have you okay, great, you don't have that, but have you been the main contact for an intern where you're their point person? You're managing them, you're helping them, you're right. So those kinds of things can help as well to prove that management experience. And let's be honest, your Peace Corps service, right? I mean, you're definitely working with the community, but you're generally managing projects, right? You're helping them with the project management. You're, oftentimes, when you were a teacher, you're doing classroom management, and that is management of people. So, so thinking about that kind of thing too. I don't know, Dan, if you have anything to add to that, but.
No, I don't think so. I'm going to stop the recording now if that sounds good to you.
Sure.
And
sure, that's fine. Thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate it. And please let us know if there's anything else we can do to help you. We're here to serve and do the topics that you want to hear. So thanks everyone.